I am very, very happy to welcome Jonathan Reyna, who is a South Park Commons founder fellow and co-founder of New Generation, to chat with me this afternoon. So everybody, please give Jonathan a warm round of applause. Just to kick things off, I actually, did the Perplexity ChatGPT, tell me what interesting things I should know about Jonathan to set the context for this conversation. And I also realized that he has a co-founder, Adam, who is somewhere here in the audience. And I was like, Adam, what are some interesting factoids that I could share about Jonathan, just to set him up with the
oh God,
right energy for this conversation? And so just to kick things off, to provide some context on you, you have an undergraduate degree from RISD, but not many people know you also have an MBA from Harvard. Jonathan was responsible for creating the annual design conference at Harvard, which is now running for 13 years. And according to Adam, you kicked off your career with your graphic design degree creating press passes to attend concerts and events for free. And so I kind of want to start with what I call the golden thread. The golden thread is the story behind the founder that sits at the center of every great enterprise. And this would kind of set the stage for not just the -1 journey for New Generation, but really the -1 journey for Jonathan Reyna.
Hey everybody, thanks for coming. I'm excited to tell the story of how I did illicit behavior with graphic design as a college student. I just want to quickly say that before we dive into that, if you are here and you're interested in SPC, which I know was one of the questions for the registration, come talk to me. I will give you an unbiased view of what it's like to be a member here, to build here. Side note, I'm a big fan. So excited to be here doing this, and yeah, love SPC. Okay, so maybe the one click before that is I started building websites and designing websites in probably middle school. And I think one of the fun things about entrepreneurs building AI today is you always have your roots, maybe your entrepreneurial bug. Sometime when you're I think a lot of people between 10 and 14. It's what was the thing that turned into you wanted to be a founder? For me, I was building snowboard websites. I turned my parents' garage into a ski and snowboard repair center for my friends. So I would do hot waxing, edge sharpening, and I grew up on the East Coast, so it was super icy, and the boards, that equipment was in terrible condition. And so I used to write letters to all the big ski and snowboard companies, Burton Snowboards, if you know them. And I was like, hey, I'm opening up a tiny snowboard shop in the western suburbs of Philadelphia where there's no snow mountains. And for whatever reason, people responded to me and they would send me posters and stickers and free swag to sponsor my shop. And so I ended up having my parents' basement covered in posters and autographs from Travis Rice and athletes that I looked up to, and a bunch of free stuff. And I think that's where it all started. And I had this website that I made. It was I won't even tell you the name of my business. Horrible name. But I think that's when I realized that you can kind of, with graphic design in particular, if you have that skill, you can just make stuff that looks real. And so I used to make, parking passes for Narragansett State Beach in Rhode Island because they would charge $25 a day to park there. And this was a while ago. That was really expensive. And I was no one can own the beach.
That's $300 in today's terms, guys.
Yeah, right, exactly. So I made them, and then my teachers bought them from me. I won't name names. But I would match the color of the Pantone color on the printed decal. It was a windshield decal. And I would do a PMS spot match, print it on my printer, laminate it, stick it on my windshield, and you just have confidence. You drive into the parking gate and you're just hey, Rob.
Nothing makes you sweat the details like counterfeiting effectively, right?
And then, the last little nugget there was I printed a press pass at the U.S. Open of snowboarding in Burlington, Vermont, and I had my like digital camcorder, and I got to sneak under the press line because I just like flashed this thing. No one looked at it, but it looked real enough. And I got to meet Shaun White, and I was like filming the half pipe, and I was like, damn, you can just do things, you know?
You can just do things. I love it. So there's probably like a very, very small set of people on this planet who have studied graphic design at RISD and then went on to get a business degree from Harvard. You probably know them all. And maybe it's a population of one, but help the audience understand what somebody does with a Harvard business degree and a graphic design degree. Like, how did you end up at getting an MBA?
I think there's one. It was the business school experience as a designer. I graduated in 2019, but I was originally with the class of 2014. It was kind of lonely, I gotta say. Like, it's a big class, it's 900 students, and so as the only designer there at the time, it was both an awesome thing because I could contribute to a unique opinion, and then it was both a lonely thing because people didn't always know what I was talking about. And maybe there's like a story there about like why I thought that was an important connection to make, but what do you do with the combination? I think fundamentally, I always refuted the idea that there was some invisible partition between design and business. And there's we don't have to rat hole like the long history of that partition and design being misunderstood by executives and vice versa, and each discipline understanding their own mutual value if they work together really well. But that was the source of the passion for me, was trying to build a bridge between the two. And I have always thought that intersection was entrepreneurship. I mean, there's a lot of designers who have elevated their careers and climbed corporate ladders and now have chief design officer titles and things like that, which is obviously really incredible. But for me, it was always the ability to build something. The design process in my mind has always been very similar to founding a company, because you were going from -1 to 0.
And then on that -1 front, one of the things that struck me just reading up on your bio and your CV is just the range of experience that you've accumulated professionally. When you and I first met, I think you were at Meta at the time. And not just like Meta standard classic Facebook app. You were working on some of the more forward-looking devices there. And you've gotten to apply your trade across a wide range of contexts. How did all that provide the pretext for New Generation?
I appreciate the optimistic look at my career. I think of it as a bit of a hodgepodge, a collection of choices, a mixtape. So I think the path I'm able to kind of logically string together as to why I made all the career decisions I did.
Maybe you can walk through them all.
Yeah, really quickly maybe, but like two things stand out to me. One is a search for complexity. I think as a designer, as a creative problem solver, I've always been drawn to complex problems, because there's a lot of meat to untangle, and a lot of the joy in being a designer is simplifying things, simplifying complexity, which, as we all know, is harder than it seems. I think that, and I think another is probably hardware, interestingly, was always exciting to me, but because in the hardware space, there's a lot of new interface work. So I was always on this quest to design new interfaces. So as you mentioned, even at Facebook, I did start on a traditional interface team, which was the photos team, doing a lot of work on newsfeed. But I tried to traverse that company and find the departments and the orgs that were building new interfaces that didn't have established patterns. And so that's what I did at Building 8, which was the innovation lab at Facebook, building net new hardware and software devices, and then tried to parlay that into Cruise, where we designed a net new interface for self-driving autonomous vehicles. And so that's the fun stuff for me. It's like, is there a new interface? can you change and manipulate the way in which people interact with hardware, with systems, with commerce, which is sort of what we're trying to tackle now.
And so with a track record like that, I feel as though you can continue working at these big tech giants, but the siren call of entrepreneurship came about. Help me understand like the -1 journey for you. It sounds like, if you go to get an MBA from Harvard, you're thinking about potentially entrepreneurship as a future path. But when did it start to really solidify for you? How did you decide to even embark? And how did South Park Commons kind of play a role in that?
Yeah, I think some people, more people now at HBS are thinking about entrepreneurship. I think when I was there, it was still a little early. The more typical path was management consulting, maybe less. We had graduated out of the investment banking kind of cohort, but and then now fast forward to like graduates now, everybody's either starting a company or going to work in tech. Like I would say 75%. You can fact check me there. I had the bug when I was an RC student, so a first-year student, and I did start a company in 2013 with a fellow classmate. And we incubated that company out of the iLab at Harvard. I worked on it for about 8 months. It was not successful for so many reasons. Really kind of pathetic now that I think about it. I made a lot of mistakes. I'm glad I had that experience. And that's why I wanted to go to business school. That was my journey. And so there was an opportunity. We entered this thing called the Dean's Cultural Entrepreneurship Challenge. Big mouthful. And we got a tiny pre-seed micro check. And we worked on it over the summer. And we were trying to build, I won't go into detail, but actually a search-based product for the cultural arts. So think of finding galleries and products to buy, furniture, museums, and the inventory of museums. We were trying to build a platform to aggregate that and help lovers and patrons of the arts and design discover that stuff. So maybe you could call that an early product graph. And then that wasn't working out. We were struggling. It was a very fragmented industry trying to sell to galleries. They were like, fuck off. And I somehow made a connection to a couple Facebook designers who were working on graph search. And that was 2013. And so graph search...
Was Russ on it? Who was working on it?
Russ was there. Yeah, because it's a good question who was on it. I think it was in the People, Places, Things org, like maybe Sam's old org. Anyway, the connection was, that was a little bit of the engineering challenge that we were trying to build. It's like a structured product graph. And at Facebook, if you remember using it, the idea here was you could search a query or a string in the search bar at Facebook and say, my friends who live in New York who love art, and hopefully get some structured results. And so that, I had a great conversation with those designers, and I was like, this is actually pretty cool. Short story, maybe I should go work on that at Facebook. And so I did. And that was the end of 2013. And I had left my RC year of business school to work on my company, turned into falling forward into Facebook, and then I ended up getting stuck at Facebook for four and a half years.
Those 4.5 years, what did you sort of take away from that experience? What did that company teach you in that era that you feel like is directly applicable to entrepreneurship today?
I learned how to think like a product builder, not just a designer. I think Facebook gets a lot of credit for pioneering the product designer role, in which we would describe as a full stack designer. I clearly remember 3 hard skills in interviewing. So there's visual design, that's an important component of that. So that for me was sort of my spike area coming from graphic design. Then interaction design, which is flows and systems and user journeys through software. And then product thinking, which Facebook I think pioneered quite well, which is really asking you the question, why would you build this? How does it scale? what are the business implications? And so for me, the product designer role at Facebook was a training in product building holistically. It was an incredible place to sharpen your craft. I think world-class design talent was attracted to Facebook during those years. I mean, you know that whole story. You were designer number 2, so like I think seated with.
They hired much better people than me by that point, so much more talented folks. But it's interesting that you mentioned like this intersection of skill sets, this full stack designer profile, because in many respects, one of the things that I want to dig into later in this conversation is how these emerging technologies might be reshuffling the deck on what the designer of today and tomorrow will need to wield in order to be effective in that role, in like, say, a full stack designer role. And so bring us to the moment at which you started thinking about, okay, I think it's my time now to build something entirely new, to start a new venture, and what you ended up deciding upon. Like, when I think about the golden thread, one of the key questions that the golden thread answers is, well, if you're a smart, capable person, if you're a full stack designer you want to co-found, there's probably 1,000 things you can work on. Why work on this particular problem space? How did you sort of settle on the problem space that you're tackling now with the new generation?
Yeah, it's a great question. I think there's two. I could distill it down to 2 things very clearly. There's a lot of things, but 2 stick out. One is, let's call it people and timing as a bucket. In between trying to do it my first time and when I started New Generation with Adam, my co-founder was about 10 years. During that time, I felt like I worked in big tech. I, sharpened my craft. I had 2 kids. I got married. I felt the opportunity slipping away, which I think, a lot of people are like, dude, no. Like, you can start a company whenever you want, and I agree with that. But I fortuitously met Adam, my co-founder, through some grad school connections out here. And I feel like during that interim 10-year period, what I was missing was like a very clear timing window where I felt like I had the energy to go do this, great adventure backpacking journey, commit 10 years to a thing. That's intimidating. It certainly was intimidating to me. I'm an ideas guy. I have a list of 150 startup ideas in my pocket at all times. And so what I needed was somebody else to connect with who we had, very balanced skill sets, but also had like a very shared philosophy of how to build, what type of company we wanted to kind of work on and make together. And I found that in Adam. I think we knew it very quickly.
How did you find that out? Because I think one of the things that gets undertold in the industry is co-founder dating, how you sort of size up, values fit, how do you sort of get a sense of, okay, we have more common ground and common philosophy than meets the eye. Like, how did the 2 of you go about that exercise?
I don't know that we didn't do like personality tests or anything like that, but I think we were very clear that we had like very different personalities. And so we were like, okay, cool, yes. It felt like a good balance. We met over cocktails, and I forget what we talked about. It was like a long, weaving conversation. Adam studied philosophy and economics, and he likes to remind me of the philosophers that he's read, and I just find that really interesting, and we can kind of rabbit hole on that stuff, but he has also a deep appreciation for design. And so I felt seen. I think he felt seen from my POV. And I think we tried to work together for a couple weeks. We started building and kind of exploring together ideas, and we very quickly aligned on the kind of brand of the open web and our philosophies around how AI was going to change the open web, whether it's going to be closed source, open source. And what stood out there was a very cool recall to the thing I said earlier around my website designing experience when I was in middle school. So we started asking ourselves, what's going to happen to the website? The website's, think about it for a second. Like, the website is an abstraction for people over like a data set, whether it's products or a table of customers. and then it lives at this permanent address on the internet that's been indexed and has like, and we quickly started to realize that all of that was sort of about to change. And the e-commerce website in particular, from a business perspective, we were like, okay, the e-commerce website as a primitive is one of the most valuable like pieces of pixel real estate on the internet. There's a lot of money that flows through those pixels. Adam had worked on payments at Stripe. So we had like the technical side, we had the payment side. Obviously, I had been shipping billions of pixels during my career, so we had that angle.
But it's also like a well-known medium, right? When I think back to my own career, like some of the most inspiring sites were commerce websites. It's like
Totally.
early aughts, Apple.com had like amazing designers making incredible web experiences. And so it's well trodden, it's well understood by the end consumer. What were some of the things that you felt like were missing or that were going to be emerging experiences that would segue neatly from what people are accustomed to today with the e-commerce website?
Man, there's so much there. So I think the really exciting thing, like the takeaway nugget, maybe we start there, is exactly what you said is the problem. Like, everybody uses these off-the-shelf e-commerce templates. It's a Squarespace or Shopify, whatever. But you know what they look like. They have a search bar at the top, there's some filters on the side of the top, and there's a grid of products. That's an e-commerce website. You click, you go to the product details page, and you check out. That entire architecture is a rigid, hard-coded architecture. And for a good reason, right? You want to lower the friction in the shopper funnel. So there's a good reason why all that came to life, but another way to say that is like these are rigid, immovable objects that are not intelligent. We were in a taxi ride in Vegas at a conference, and we were explaining our idea for New Generation to the taxi driver, and he was like, "So you mean websites are stupid?" And we're like, "Yeah, basically." And then, so that's really the thread, right? And so I think another way to say the opportunity is e-commerce websites, because of how they have been built, are the primitive that is about to get the most disrupted. Because now you have this intelligence that's flexible LLM protocol that's being experimented with all over the place. I think that begets the need for more intelligent software all over the internet. And so because this one is valuable and because it's ultra rigid, there's a huge opportunity to kind of break that paradigm.
And given that you're sort of not just merely fighting the consumer's expectations around the form factor, I sort of think of it as like a car rental, right? You go to a car rental company, you rent a car, you expect the car to roughly work like any other car on the lot. You as the end consumer will be frustrated if the car does stuff that's unpredictable or if the controls are in weird places. We've all experienced this sort of, designer innovation when, the button is put in some weird place or the ignition knob is not where you expect it to be as part of your first run experience. But you're also selling effectively to brands who have enormous amounts of opportunity costs with any changes they make to products that are in flight. Help me understand a little bit about how you're trying to triangulate between the expectation and needs of the customers you're looking to serve, but ultimately the experiences that you're hoping to empower them with to the end buyer or to the end visitor of the website.
Yeah, so real quick, what we're doing at New Generation is we're making every brand's first AI storefront. And so the way to think about that is they have products they want to sell. Those products live in a catalog or database. That database is rigid. We make that smart with AI. And then on top of that, we put a generative interface on the front end, effectively allowing the brand to tailor the shopper journey to every single customer that lands there. So they could use natural language search like you can in ChatGPT, and we can basically in real time build a web page for that customer that is really a one-for-one match on what they're looking for. So that's kind of what we're trying to do. The brand feels a lot of this pain already. They feel deep pain with the way that their product catalogs work and the operating expense, the tagging, the manual manipulation and merchandising logic. It's a slog. It's a hamster wheel. So they felt that pain. We knew that. We did a lot of pattern matching early with that. On the front end side, one of the biggest complaints about the existing e-commerce websites they use, and they don't innovate in very much for said reasons, is there's still a lot of shopper friction. Like, case in point, if you're a consumer, everyone knows what it's like to try to find a very specific thing in a large catalog, and especially across multiple brands. You're like, okay, many tabs, less than $200, red, made of linen. You know, do you have time to sit there for 30 minutes and like try to compare all that? So that's just the problem we want to solve on the front end with AI. Now, your question about how we sell to brands, they need to be, they care deeply about how they show up on their website. They hire design agencies. They spend millions of dollars building that stuff. The nice thing is we can hard code some of that logic into what is otherwise an elastic system or a generative system. And for the places within that logic that we can hyper customize to customers, that's where we let the LLM kind of really run free.
If you were to pick like a dream customer that you're like, okay, if I can work with this company, this is the commerce experience of tomorrow that we envision, that would be most representative of like our vision.
There are companies that have really great brands that have huge and complex product catalogs that also have a ton of traffic that still go to those .com websites. It's in the realm of those that we aspire to serve. That would be like an IKEA, a Sephora, companies like that, because they have such high traffic. And I want to come back to one point you said around they spent a lot of money and they've, with great care, architected these shopper funnels, right? There's a lot of testing and logging, and we know from lots of conversations that, for example, anecdotally, the product details page is like this jewel box that you are not allowed to touch as an outside supplier, let alone like an adjacent org in the company. You can't touch that. And so the way we get around this is we say, keep your existing website as it is. We're going to build you your first smart AI page that you can host on a subdomain. So our early go-to-market is ai.ikea.com. And so we can run easy experimentation, clean attribution tests. We can drive incremental traffic to it without, blowing up their bottom line. And
you can almost like eat what you kill, right? You've sandboxed the shopping experience, and you can sort of essentially run in parallel to the main property and show, hey, here's how we perform relative to your crown jewels.
Exactly right. And I think that's like really the wedge for us. And it is a smart way, we think, we call it like an easy angle of attack for the brand relationship. If you're a brand right now, you feel kind of intimidated or scared about how traffic on the internet is changing, referral traffic. Is your website smart enough? Is it good enough? Are you leaving money on the table because you're not investing in AI? They have all of these concerns. And so we effectively Trojan horse an experimentation machine for them on this simple page, just a page.
And I want to dive into eventually the question around like, well, I'm also hearing a lot about like agents doing shopping for people instead of people doing shopping for themselves. But tabling that for a second, you come to this problem space and this vision for a product with a wide range of experiences. Which ones did you end up finding yourself drawing on more heavily than you might have otherwise expected? Like, what are the skills that are actually essential
in the role?
For a designer founder in the year 2025, building an AI native startup that either surprised you or that you're like, man, I'm really leaning on this much harder than I was expecting to?
That's a great question. I would say, and I think I would attribute this to maybe, every co-founding team is different. Every early founding team is different in their composition. But for our team in particular, I think I've been stretched much more into the technical engineering side than I've ever been in my career. It makes sense, right? Like, you know, if you're a product designer, even if you're a full stack designer at a tech company, you're not looked to necessarily contribute a lot of PRs and contribute code. You can, and you can prototype, but usually like the technical work ends at prototyping. And so I think I've been leaning on that, and because I'm one of the co-founders, I need to understand the tech side very deeply. And so I have great teammates around me that educate me every day about the ins and outs of the tech stack that we're building. So that, for one, I think I'm definitely doing all the design work, along with we have a founding designer who's incredible. So that feels good. I knew I was going to do that, and I'm doing like 3 times more of that than I thought I would. It's everything from brand design, website, product, collateral for sales meetings. I've made like 10,000 presentations. And I thankfully, I like that stuff. I like making presentations. Some people don't. And maybe the third would be ops and sales. I think operations, like both Adam and I do probably 50-50 right now. That's just like running the business. Do we have enough money? Are we spending the money in the right way? Are we seeing around corners? A lot of strategy work. That's all fun. Sales, I think we also do a bit of sales, both of us, but I think my contribution to sales and getting early customers is making sure the customers are happy. And I deeply understand how the product we're building fits exactly what the customer is expressing they want, whether they articulate that verbatim or not.
A lot of the people who are here might have had their ears perk up at the fact that you have a founding designer on the team. And so one of the things that I really wanted to talk to you about is you did an excellent job articulating the 3 pillars that Facebook looked for in hiring for product design. But they sound very pre-GPT to me. And now you're hiring post-GPT for an AI native startup. What are the qualities that you look for in this new kind of design team? How is it different from the pre-GPT era designer?
Yeah. It's a good question. And it's been a learning curve for me, to be honest. And I think for a lot of founders about who is the right designer. Do you hire a founding designer? When do you do that? I can say for us, we knew very early on, think about like what the product we're building is. We are not working in static interfaces. We're not building a mobile app. If you're hiring a designer for those tasks, you hire a traditional product designer, maybe someone with a strong UI background. Maybe you do platform-specific hiring, like we need an iOS person. Those rules are quickly changing. And so a lot of companies, you're not necessarily looking for somebody to build a static product like that with the same heuristics of what success looks like, with the same types of design systems. So we're building a living, breathing interface that is morphing all the time. And so we knew that we needed a very technical founding designer, somebody who could really code switch between UI and front-end product building and being like the best engineering partner that we could find. Somebody to cross that line, because we don't have the scale or the dollars right now to build teams on either side of that line. And crossing that line traditionally has been frictionful for lots of companies. Engineering and design collaboration. You throw a PM in there and it's like this triangle of bureaucracy. We don't have time for that. And so Nick, our founding designer, had a unique ability to kind of be, we call it prototype native. He almost never starts in Figma anymore. He is building live prototypes very, very quickly, and we're able to plug in some of our LLM stack into the front end that he's building, and within a week, we are experimenting with our full stack code with an interface that we can evaluate with our brand partners.
What's been that process for you all? Because I think that's one of the things that I find most interesting about AI startups today is that there is a little bit of indeterminism in what the models can and cannot do. And so you are sort of trying to tease out what are the capabilities of these models today? Where can we kind of bet on where the puck is going? And where can we sort of like sit tight and not make promises we can't keep to customers and brands who are really counting us to provide something that has some degree of determinism, especially if they're coming from the advantage of we've got this crown jewel and we know exactly how it works and it's perfectly instrumented, and you're over here talking to me about something that sounds a little bit like AI slop. How are you navigating like R&D in this landscape?
Man, yeah. I mean, this is literally like 40%, 50% of my headspace every week. So how do we navigate the slop? So let's talk about determinism for a second. If you're a brand, right now you're 100% deterministic. Let's imagine that's true, and it's probably pretty true. Meanwhile, this new technology has come out, and we had signs of it last year, maybe even 18 months ago, some early startups doing generative interfaces. I think what was true then is you were generating still static interfaces. You could use an LLM to come up with 15 versions of a thing, but they're still static. Today, you really need interfaces that can generate themselves but have strict rules and guidelines. Let's call that a AI design system. So I definitely think there's a lot of work that's going to come online in the next 2 years where you will not be building a brand guidelines style book or a design system in the same way. You will basically be using an LLM to be the visual design agent or the brand guidelines agent that is the arbiter of the quality control and the output of that. So you really need a lot of that today. You need a lot of training wheels. You can go vibe code a thing in Lovable, and if that's a singular instance of a product, great. And you can tune it, great. But what's very, very hard still today is creating an entire workflow and multiple products and multiple surfaces that all are using the same judgment for how they relate to each other and achieve like a holistic brand expression. Very, very hard. So I think that's where it goes. I think brands will have an intelligence. That's what a brand will become. And those will have to guide the generation of interfaces.
So there are companies today like ChatGPT, Perplexity, that are vying for this agentic future where consumers, normies, can ask computers to go and shop for them, do things for them. And, to a cynical eye, somebody can look at new generation and say, Jonathan, websites are going to die, man. Like, nobody wants to spend their time on a website. And brands are going to have to express in new ways, They're going to have to get on TikTok, and they're going to have to spend more time entertaining people rather than trying to transact with them over the internet. Steel man the case for me around new generation, because when I look at your background, one of the things that has always struck me is like your penchant for presentation and storytelling. And it sort of seems like a central pillar of new generation. Is the future that I'm seeing the same as the one that you're seeing in terms of what role websites will have on consumers' day-to-day lives, how they sort of interact with brands?
So it's a good question because there's two sides to this argument, and I don't know. Nobody really knows where this is going to end up, if we're being honest. But my view is that websites aren't going to go away. A lot of people do say that. They're like, oh, interfaces are going to go away altogether. I don't think so. Interfaces, there were hardware interfaces and now there are software interfaces, and a book is an interface. People have eyeballs. They want to use their own judgment. Like, that's an important biological modality of interacting with computers. So I don't think websites go away. I think traffic may change to them, and here's one example of that. So one of the things we're excited about is preparing for agents going to websites instead of people. We just look at that as a different stakeholder or a new stakeholder. So they need maybe a different type of interface, but there's still an interface. And if you are a shopper, a customer, maybe for commodity purchases, you don't need to go peruse Amazon and go find the toilet paper you want to put on reorder. But I think people like shopping. They like discovering new things. They like evaluating. And so I think there will always be a use case for that. And the great thing is, instead of it being a static website, it can be form fit to you. Think about even like where this is going. So ChatGPT has memory now. It's going to know a lot about you. And what if people shop in ChatGPT's interface and they never leave? What if they create a marketplace of products that you can buy in that chat stream? The thing that's different is that customer traffic is not going to the website, but now the content of the website needs to go to the LLM interface. And so you could still have a rendered visual presentation in ChatGPT powered by a brand and their products and the way they want to express and merchandise those products. But the pipes are different. So I think that's a very interesting future and one that we're thinking about a lot.
What do you think the primitives will be there in that context? You know, one of the things that I often wonder about is, for example, self-visualization, right? Everybody remembers that wonderful scene in The Matrix, right? Residual self-image. It's like at some point that will appear in people's day-to-day commerce. Is that one such primitive? Are there other primitives that you guys are exploring that you feel pretty confident is going to be a part of a future powered by new generation?
I think there's endless primitives. So one way we think about that is, so remember how I described what we're building as like two parts. One is a catalog, a smart catalog of products, and then an interface that lives on top of those products. That front end, that interface could be 1,000 different expressions. Think about generative video and images right now. Brands are very, very early on their journey learning about how to manipulate them to be on brand and fit every use case so they don't have to spend millions of dollars on photo shoots and stuff like that. So for example, think about the TikTok thing you said. Brands may become content engines and produce lots of that stuff. Maybe they have VR experiences that are generated. So the front end expression is going to be unlimited, I think. Where we see us powering that is to be the intelligence layer for the brand that takes their catalog and can help inform and render that limitless front-end experience. We think about that a little bit as like a plaid for product data. And so yeah, it's very interesting, but I think what comes with that data is like the products that the brand owns, the expression logic for how it should be rendered. And then they're not going to care in the future if they're shopping on their website or ChatGPT, so long as they make the purchase, they understand who the customer is, and they don't feel disintermediated by one of the platforms.
I know, we're having this conversation at South Park Commons, and I think Aditya would probably kick me in the shins if I didn't ask the question of what role did SPC play in this -1 journey for your team? What do you wish you had known then? And what would you say to the aspiring designer entrepreneur sitting in this audience who's thinking about like taking the plunge?
Mm-hmm. They were okay. SPC, I mean, the biggest impact on our company, I think, is a fair way to put it. So we joined the community. There's 2 tracks here, which you may know. There's the Founder Fellowship, and there's a community. I would do it all again, for sure. I think the impact in the early days was if you join the community, you're put in a squad with one of the partners. Ours is Eventana. That's a very focused time for you. I think it's 6 weeks long. You meet once a week, and it's an opportunity for you to accelerate your idea with a cohort of other founders and entrepreneurs with the partner. And that was extremely helpful for us because we got a lot of feedback. We built some prototypes, and by the end of that squad, we had something that was like the early shape of NewGen, what it is today. And I think because of the nature of the community, it is I think it's smart on SPC's part, by the way. They have 100% observability over all the elves in the workshop. So I'm like, that's cool. But I think it allowed us to have a very open dialogue without pressure. And that's so important in the early days. You know, there's a lot of different perspectives on how valuable ideas are, right? A lot of people are like, ideas are worthless, it's all execution. I find myself not fully agreeing with that, where ideas in the very beginning are quite fragile and need to be nurtured and incubated. And of course, you need execution. And that's another place where SPC helped a lot. It's like they constantly give you opportunities to demo and showcase. And we demoed at the winter demo fair in January of this year. And that was a huge opportunity for us to like hold ourselves accountable, but also get really valuable feedback that we needed in the beginning.
And then to founders who are here that are like, man, how do I hire a Jonathan Reyna? Like, how do I think about designing my own startup? What advice would you have to them on how they should be thinking about the field of design in this new modern context as we're dealing with like these emerging tools and ways in which to build experiences for end customers?
I think if I look back at like patterns in time in tech, this feels a lot like 2011 to me, where I was earlier in my career then, and I felt like I missed the wave a little bit. You know, I got in maybe on like wave 3 or 4 when I joined Facebook, and I got to participate in the exuberance and the technical innovations that were happening around mobile and video. We're at the beginning of that slope. You've probably heard this everywhere, but I really feel that building today where you got to put yourself, you know, on the batter's box. You got to put yourself there. And I think that's really what I started to realize is that, like I said, I had carried around for a decade all these ideas. And I had excuse after excuse after excuse why it wasn't the right time, the ideal time, or worse, not the perfect idea. And what I think I realized, and what AI really helps with, is the experimentation speed is like now 10x. The build speed is now 10x. So a lot of the things that probably would have killed you before, you can de-risk. The other thing I would say, if you're thinking about it, if you're a designer, how is the designer role different? You should get a co-founder, and you do need actual technical people to build with. I think it's really bad advice. Maybe this won't age well, but right now, I think it's pretty bad advice to go think you can go do everything alone. There's a lot of leverage you have as a designer now to build things that are coded and working. But those are toys for the most part, I think. In practice at our company, we can use those things to prototype really quickly, but we're building a commercial scale product. There's real infrastructure behind that it would be a complete waste of time to vibe code all that stuff. You probably could not do it. And so I think those would be my 2 pieces of advice as a designer. It's like, you still need a technical person, or you need a co-founder just emotionally to help you get through this whole thing, because it is a long journey. And put yourself in the position to succeed. Like, join a community like SPC. Put yourself in a position to have opportunities where a great builder or a partner like Evan sees what you're building and is like, hey, there's something there. You should run at that over the next couple of weeks like this. That's so valuable.
I want to bring us back towards the beginning. We were joking about this before we got on stage. You're on the board of RISD, right? A design institution.
In the future?
In the future. What do you hope for the future of design education, given all this? Like, what do you think we're not teaching people that we need to be teaching them much earlier on, based on what you've learned firsthand on your own and based on your own undergraduate experience? What does the future of design education need to look like?
We've talked a lot about this in the past. Some of my favorite chats with you. Ben Blumenrose is here too. We've talked a lot about that. This is like a very special topic to me because I've been deeply involved with RISD since I graduated. In fact, a couple years ago, we flew out about 20 students to the Bay Area. We called it Tech Trek. And these were like primarily industrial design students, graphic design students, the applied arts, to come out and understand and feel firsthand what it's actually like in San Francisco, at being a designer at some of these big companies. And so that is like the lowest hanging fruit, I think, is there is a real trade-off being isolated. Like I really believe the epicenter of all of this is San Francisco. New York is great. I love New York, but there's a real gravity here, and I think the presence that RISD in particular has here is insufficient. And so that's number one. I think from a curriculum POV, and I've had a lot more success working with RISD as an alum and with alums because the curriculum is kind of sacrosanct at RISD. It's hard to change. And I think there's a reason why. Like RISD is a classic design education, very deeply rooted in the Bauhaus, typographic principles, color and image. Students are still, in 2025, designing books and movie posters. And I don't think that should go away. But I think they need to, here's the way I would say it. I can try to summarize it. RISD was started in the Industrial Revolution. They were a school that was deeply connected to industry. Furniture making, jewelry making, print making, kind of traditional arts like that. If you look today at through that same lens, the industry today, the surface area that is most able to be impacted by designers are interfaces and now AI interfaces. These are the materials and mediums of our time. And so I feel like if you're a RISD, you have a deep obligation to be bringing that into your pedagogy. And if you're not, the students have to go do that all themselves. And so I would like to see a little bit more integration in curriculum. Maybe let's call it product design in the most generous sense of that term. There should be a department that focuses on that, which is not graphic design and it is not industrial design.
I feel like I learn something from you every time we chat. Very grateful that you spent your lunch here. Can everybody please give Jonathan a warm round of applause?
Thanks for coming.
Do we have time for Q&A? Is that something we do here? All right. Rapid fire Q&A. Let's do it. Pass mine.
Hi, nice to meet you, Jonathan. Thank you for coming. I'm an artist and also a founder, a builder right now. Just wondering, in your perspective, how does being a great designer make you a great technology or software builder?
Ooh. Okay, so I have a good answer to this, I think. We're past the wave of having to prove that great user experience is valuable. I think everyone really deeply realizes that now, on the consumer side and also the B2B side, which trailed consumer, but now everyone knows that. And so there's also a conversation about taste. And I think taste is kind of a dirty word. I think it's a trap, it's a honeypot. My word for that, and where I think designers can really have an impact as technologists, is about having sensibility. And what I mean, I think the difference between sensibility and taste is extremely subjective, whereas sensibility is about making the right decisions in the context you're in, like the right choices. And those can be aesthetic choices, they can be experiential choices. I think that's where we are as a society. People crave that. There's so many more case studies of that value now than there were 10, 15, 20 years ago. Everyone was like, oh, Apple's the case. Like, well, there's hundreds now. So I think that's extremely high leverage. If you're going to build software, or physical objects or experiences, having that sensibility. Designers, artists, creative thinkers that's their superpower.
Hey, thank you so much for the time and kind of just walking through your vision and what you're hoping to build. One thing that I'm curious about is you talked about the commerce funnel being one of the most defined and understood funnels, sort of that's come out of the web interface. And there's a lot that you can measure and test and understand from top to bottom. With an abstract and fluid interface, that middle of the funnel kind of becomes a black box. So I'm curious how you and your team think about measuring the messy middle, or does it really just boil down to bottom line metrics is what counts, and that's how you measure success?
This is a great question. Okay, so I'm gonna politely disagree, and here's how. So I actually think the messy middle in that consumer funnel, it's messy today. I think today it's a black box. So like think about a brand will instrument and log as much as they can in that funnel. So you hit the website, you navigate around, maybe you go through the hierarchical navigation of the website, maybe you click on some stuff, maybe you search with a keyword, maybe you buy something. There's so much energy and resourcing that goes into instrumenting that logging, to proving attribution. That is a cluster. I think what's going to be really cool, the upgrade to that we see is we now call that part of the whole funnel from discovery all the way down to checkout. All the stuff on the site is now where brand intelligence will live. And what does that mean? It means if you can have a conversation with a customer and you know what you're generating for them, and you know what products are being merchandised to them, and literally it's almost high fidelity. Rather than click, click, click keyword, it is, here's my situation, here's what I'm looking for, I don't like this, I love this, more like this. That data is like an order of magnitude more valuable for the brand. And so I think the visibility of knowing your customer skyrockets.
And you can see why that's extremely valuable to the brand, right? Having that proprietary knowledge, that interaction for every subsequent customer. Yeah, that's the best pitch I've heard so far for new generation. I think
Great.
we have time
We'll
for
use
one
it
or two
more.
more questions. Okay.
Thanks so much, Jonathan. I'm curious. I think there's going to be so much power in these fluid dynamic interfaces for kind of like, I have this in mind, can you help me out? But I'm wondering what you've learned about shopper psychology when it comes to like editors' picks and curation, because I think I work in the news space and I've seen this too. People don't just want personalized feeds. They also want someone to say, okay, I've been working, for 20 years as an editor, and this is the most important thing. And so I'm curious what you've learned about how much of that shoppers want, how you're feeding that into what you're building at.
Yeah, I like this question too. So I'll tell you why the brand likes that, or they want to play in that space, is a lot of those like curation bundles or editorial or editorizing products increases average order volume. You're more likely to buy more stuff. If there's one thing and it's like, oh, you should also get this, it goes well, or you can abstract that to different shopping verticals. And I agree with you on the consumer, like the burden of the consumer. You don't always want to have to search and say what you want. A lot of times you want to be merchandised too, which is how the homepage works today. And that can go like way off the rails. Go to like Williams Sonoma's website right now, and it is 20,000 pixels of them shouting at you. And that can become super overwhelming. So I think you just need a balance. And so we're finding that, at least with our product and our ability to generate a page, before you even enter a search, there's an opportunity to try to even further contextualize what you might like before you have to do the work of typing. This is something I'm very excited about too, that we're building. Imagine coming from ChatGPT, say you've had a 15-minute chat interaction in ChatGPT being like, here's what I'm trying to find. And then you link out to a brand and you land on a new gen AI page. What if you could take a context object from your chat history in ChatGPT and then drop that onto the AI page? And now you have some of those automatically created bundles that you were referencing. We definitely think that's the future of how the brand-owned website works.
Anyone else? One last question up in the front. These have been fantastic, by the way.
Yeah, thanks, Jonathan, for sharing your insight. So I'm Mike, CEO of Revella. So I come from a bit of a technical side of things. So what, it sounds like you're like the ultimate multimodal challenge you're trying to deal with in generative AI. So you're really generating text, images, maybe even video, audio, HTML code, all in real time for this unique user experience. In your review, what is like the single biggest technical hurdle you're trying to get over in this product you're building? And like the thing that really would unleash it if you solved it?
We talk about these a lot.
Is this like a GPT wish list? Or does it
Yeah,
take
we
a
have
different
a
form?
long list. Adam, I have a different answer to this than I would, but I think pretty clearly, at least today, the biggest technical hurdle is navigating a little bit of what Soleio was bringing up around like deterministic experiences versus non. And so there's this inside joke in our office, if you've seen the Portlandia episode about put a bird on it, that's how we call LLMs. Just like, oh, hey, you sprinkle some LLMs on this, it will like magically work. So we have this whole data pipeline, as you can imagine, that feeds into the catalog and then helps to inform the generative front end. There's LLMs at different parts of that pipeline and flow. And doing a lot of re-ranking and rewriting prompts is challenging. And getting that whole orchestra to play like nice listening sheet music is really challenging. You can do it like one instance, but you're right, we are feeding in a bunch of different components into a page. There's text generation, there's a title of the page, there's image generation, there's picking the right products, and all those need to come together. And you can tell very quickly whether it passes the sniff test or not. You look at it and you're like, wow, this text is great, but these are just the wrong products. So I think it's the orchestration of all of those birds is like what we're spending a lot of time trying to get right. Adam, is that a good answer? Yeah, thumbs up from my technical co-founder.
Jonathan, thank you so much for coming this afternoon. Thank you all for coming out to this fireside.